Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god of the dead. He watched over the ceremonial embalming of the Egyptian pharaohs. According to their beliefs, the bodies of the deceased had to be preserved from decay to enter the realm of the dead. Slim and sinewy, Anubis was the divine image of the African jackal roaming the desert at night. The Egyptians observed the jackals on their ceaseless search for food around the graves, and because of their constant presence around the deceased, they were thought to be the guides of the dead to the hereafter. For 4,000 years, the jackals of ancient Egypt were considered divine beings. In order to mummify a body and preserve it for thousands of years, all its inner organs had to be removed. The jackals around the graveyards of the poor employed a similar technique. They ensured that the deceased were naturally preserved. Stripped of their entrails, the bodies of the deceased dried out in the hot desert sand without decaying. Anubis, the god of death, is evidence of the reverence for jackals in ancient Egypt. 4,000 years later, they are mentioned in Eastern Europe. But here they are not considered sacred, but a symbol of death and devastation. And meanwhile, evidence is mounting. Jackals are right among us.
Increased sightings of jackals in Central Europe are reported. I wanted to know more, so I asked Elizabeth Schoenthal if I could join her search for jackals. For hours, we've been rumbling through one of the best-known habitats of jackals in Europe. Every square mile was supposed to contain 5 jackals, but not one showed up in front of our headlights. Just rabbits crossing our path now and again. Elizabeth Schoenthal is considered a jackal expert. I'd seen her pictures from Africa of packs of jackals fighting over their prey. But what was this? Elizabeth most likely noticed my disappointment. Would I be able to see right here in Europe what she experienced in Africa?
1991 was the year of Elizabeth Schoenthal's first trip to Namibia. Originally, the Austrian researcher was going to observe big cats. Namibia is a paradise for animal lovers. Virtually all African large animal species live here. Endless herds of antelopes and gazelles roam the savanna. But in spite of all this wealth of animal life around her, one species attracted her greatest interest: the jackal. On the Namibian coast, the veterinarian's curiosity grew to be a real passion. Every year, in February, thousands of seal cubs are born here. For hours, Elizabeth would watch their activity. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, jackals appeared among the seals and searched the herd for injured and dead animals. Wherever they struck lucky, they fell upon the prey together. Elizabeth was fascinated by how jackals took advantage of every opportunity presenting itself. Their tremendous adaptability made a lasting impression on her mind. She began to watch and search for jackals, first in Africa, then in Europe. She collected hundreds of sighting reports, and they confirm the European golden jackal is moving even farther from the east towards the west and north of Europe. In the winter of 2000, jackals were first spotted as far north as Sweden. A young male repeatedly turns up near a female elk and her calf. At first, the elks were irritated, but soon ignored the jackal. Sometime later, the golden jackal was seen hunting. He seemed to be able to smell his prey through the snow. Jackals play with their catch, stimulating the production of saliva and gastric juices to better digest the hairy food. This amazing animal, at home in the African desert, moved as comfortably in the Swedish snow as if this were its natural habitat. Jackals command a strong sense of smell. They sniff at the surface, what's at the bottom of the stream. That's how easily they detect carcasses. But everything that moves in the water is a welcome meal too. Omnivores, they don't depend on meat alone. Fruit may complement their menu too. The only competitors of jackals are superior hunters like wolves or large birds of prey. Where they are missing, the jackal gains a foothold. According to a report from Slovenia, jackals are very straightforward in their occupation of new territories. In 2003, woodcutters found fox-like tracks around a hunting lodge. The strange marks also led inside the house. Foxes are known to break into stables, but not human dwellings. The intruder could not have been a fox. The unknown visitor was mostly interested in a rack with preserves and jams. But his final choice fell on chili-flavored potato chips, and 2 empty packs remained on the scene. From a distance, the golden jackal and the fox are confusingly similar. Consequently, sightings of jackals are often questioned by scientists. In research, only shot or run-over jackals are accepted as evidence for the spreading of the species. In 1987, a golden jackal was shot in the Austrian Alpine foothills. Its appearance raised a lot of questions. Were golden jackals once at home here and now are simply returning? Or are they searching for new habitats? Why are they progressing even farther northwest? Perhaps the golden jackal is a messenger of global climate change. These questions also concern Elizabeth Schoenthal. Today, she is acutely aware that her first encounter with jackals was not in Africa. They already crossed her path much earlier.
We don't find the jackals, they find us, people say in Romania. But me, they apparently ignored. Not so Elizabeth. Her affinity with jackals goes back to her early childhood. In passing, she told me about a curious encounter on holidays in Hungary. While at play, she suddenly heard something. It sounded like the whining of little dogs. The previous night, a thunderstorm had knocked down an old tree. At its roots, Elizabeth discovered what looked like puppy dogs. She thought the clumsy, woolly balls had been abandoned by their mother and took them with her. The little ones immediately cuddled up in her arms.
Na, nálad meg mi van? Ezeket nem vihetsz haza, ezek nári farkas kölyökök.
She didn't understand what the men were saying and why they took the animals from her. But most likely, this childhood experience of hers was the key for her unquenchable interest in jackals. Elizabeth's research center is a tiny hut in the uninhabited reeds of southern Hungary. When we arrived, a thunderstorm broke loose. Wet clothes and no electric light, no water, no power. I hadn't prepared for that. But then an injured raven right in the middle of the single tiny room? That was really too strange. Elizabeth called the bird her jackal raven, but why, I was able to find out only much later. The next day, we fought our way through the high reeds for hours. No jackals anywhere.
Schau dort drüben. Da sind Seeadler.
Instead, Elizabeth showed me dozens of bird species.
Und da, schau. Auf der Insel dort drüben. Dort nisten
More than
dieses Jahr
300
300
cormorants are breeding on the island. There might be jackals there.
Wo?
In 1998, a jackal was seen near a cormorant colony. Time and time again, the cormorant parents returned with giant eels the weak beaks of their young ones couldn't hold. Which was the jackal's chance. Until the young birds fully fledged, he returned day after day, patiently waiting for his share.
I scanned the shore, but saw only birds. Absolutely nothing indicated any jackal presence.
Aber Schakale sehe ich
I
da
didn't
keine.
see any jackals, but Elizabeth says that's precisely the point. You don't see them, but they are there.
Trotzdem sind sie da.
They are here, and yet they are invisible. The jackal's life in the shadows has fostered many stories about them. But to this day, it remains a mystery how they got here from Africa. According to a widespread legend in Bulgaria and Romania, they were abandoned. Coastal pirates are supposed to have brought them here. These pirates had long been trying to ransack the residents living along the Black Sea coast and in the Danube Delta, but they were mostly unsuccessful. The settlers hid whatever little they had so well among the reeds that the pirates were unable to find anything. And even when kidnapped, tortured, and threatened with death, the locals wouldn't divulge their hiding places. In revenge, it's said the pirates left them what they considered to be the most gifted thieves in the world, the golden jackals. They were to inflict damage on the people of the coastal region and loot where the pirates had failed. This cunning plan, as recorded by legend, was to come true about 100 years later. Until then, the jackals lived as though in paradise. The Danube Delta is the largest continuous reed area in the world. It's an important hub for migratory birds. More than 300 species rest or breed along the unspoilt riverbanks. Asian and European plant species coexist here. Various microclimates provide ideal conditions for more than 2,000 insect species and virtually all European reptiles and amphibians. For golden jackals, this means food in abundance. Legend tells of the golden jackal living peacefully and unnoticed in the dense reeds. They were invisible, hunting and fishing in secret. But due to such excellent living conditions, their numbers increased rapidly. And paradise was soon too small. The jackals faced no natural enemies here, so they expanded their territories and came even closer to human settlements. Their first mention in Bulgaria dates back to the 14th century. The records describe them as small wolves that came to light and disappeared like ghosts. Until then, these creatures apparently had no name in Europe. But from that time forth, the jackals of Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary are known as reed wolves, wolves of the reed. In some areas, they are still commonly referred to by that name. But the ghosts of the past turned into a plague. They used every opportunity to gather food. According to Romanian records, the fishermen complained about the thieving reed wolves. The jackals are so bold, not even fire will deter them, which is most likely why they became allies of Satan too. If a fisherman's catch is left unguarded for just a moment, it is gone. Thus, the cunning plan of the coastal pirates apparently bore fruit. Today, the golden jackal is hunted without a closed season nearly everywhere, which has made him shy and that's why he's rarely seen near human settlements in Central Europe anymore. Moldovan reports state, however, that especially at harvest time, jackals will help themselves to the fruit orchards. Up to 40% of their intake of food can be fruit. But even a faint rustle easily distracts them from their vegetarian diet. The jackal is an omnivore, which is another reason why he is one of the most adaptable species. Since jackals exhibit such a shy behavior, it's difficult to track their numbers. One technique is to expose the animals to their own howling during mating season, which is exactly what Elisabeth Schöntel does in southwest Hungary. Until then, it was unknown if jackals lived there, but the expert found their tracks in summer. By counting the jackals responding to the howling, she hopes to determine their number. For the longest time, only the megaphone is heard. Elisabeth searches the surroundings with a spotlight. Suddenly, the beam of light reveals a jackal. In the darkness next to him, another pair of sparkling eyes. So that's proof that golden jackals are settled here. But how many? Then a first response from not too far away. All counts in the past few years attest that there are substantially more jackals than previously suspected. The reason probably being that because of their appearance, they're easily confused with foxes in Europe, but their howling exposes them. Jackals are much closer than you know. When in summer swarms of insects dance across the dry grasslands, a new source of food presents itself to them. But we still know very little about the jackal in Central Europe.
On the third day, we came through an area of salt lakes. Vegetation was low, so the chance of spotting a jackal was pretty good. Elisabeth found some jackal hair. It could be from a cub.
Das könnte von einem Jungen sein.
But whether hair, remains of food, or excrement, all were old and had already been exposed to the sun for days or weeks. One had fed here. I realized I had to let go of images of packs of jackals, like the ones in Africa. In our latitudes, one gets to see a jackal only with a lot of luck.
For researchers, a futile search for a certain species over several days is nothing unusual. In Romania, Elisabeth Schöntel set up her camouflage tent near a jackal burrow. In her estimation, about 10 animals should have turned up within viewing distance of her tent. But the very first morning, Elisabeth merely saw a young female for a few brief moments. In the following days, the scenery seemed empty. A large number of jackal sightings happen purely by coincidence, as jackals, unlike wolves which run in packs, keep mostly to themselves. And it was wolves that led Elizabeth to a jackal. It was on a hill, not far away. Wolves are the jackal's only enemies, but here they paid no attention to them. Rather than attacking, they seemed to retreat. But suddenly they appear again. Elizabeth followed them for a short time, but then quickly lost sight of them. The jackal had most likely reached its burrow. The next day, Elizabeth discovered wolf scratches at the entrance and the tree. The wolves were unable to get inside the burrow. The entrance was much too narrow and the root system too dense. They came away without achieving anything. But the jackal and her cubs most likely left their former hunting grounds that night, for when Elizabeth found their burrow, it was empty. In the following days, Elizabeth was repeatedly made aware of jackals by other animals. One day during her field work, she noticed the call of a magpie. Moments later, a young female jackal came and buried the remains of her catch. The wind constantly changed direction and must have betrayed Elizabeth, because the jackal disappeared. But Elizabeth wouldn't give up and built a mobile camouflage. She turns into a shrub. Superbly camouflaged and heeding the changing wind, she sneaks up to the jackal's burrow and her cubs. She even succeeds in filming close-ups, since the young ones aren't intimidated by the walking shrub. Barely 3 weeks old, they are already pretty nimble. One of the pups even manages to catch a mouse. The Black Sea coastline of Bulgaria. The ancient Greek poet Homer already called it the mother of sheep, and to this day, sheep breeding remains an important industry. Bulgaria's history and culture are very old, as numerous monasteries and libraries amply testify. Elizabeth Schöntal went to Bulgaria for the first time in the year 2000 as a student of veterinary medicine. But the purpose of her trip wasn't jackals. She was looking for old medicines against sheep diseases. But even here she encountered jackals. The devils on the religious icons had jackal heads. One of the 15th century texts contained even more clues. It told of jackals threatening the local shepherds' flocks and savaging countless of their sheep night after night. The jackals were creatures from hell, allies of Satan. Could their numbers have increased so much that they became a plague? Even today, there are reports of jackals driving sheep over cliffs to their deaths at night. Scientific proof of such behavior, though, is non-existent. Back in those days, when the jackals were condemned, a sheep disease decimated the herds. The golden jackals, with their tremendous sense of smell, were probably always the first to spot a dead animal. So they were suspect, and finally became the scapegoats. Modern research cannot confirm that jackals threaten domesticated herds, although the jackals themselves seem to strongly attract their human hunters, especially when the young cattle are born and grow up in the pastures. For several years, water buffalo have been bred again in Hungary. They arrived here in the wake of the great European migration period. But by the middle of the 20th century, they were almost extinct. Now there are sizable herds again. The buffalo is exclusively kept outdoors. Near such herds, traces of a jackal have repeatedly been found. Once, he was even seen eating buffalo dung. At first, the buffaloes ignore him. Only when he draws closer do they grow vigilant. Instinctively, they realize that the jackal is a danger. The buffaloes keep a watchful eye on him, and when the troublemaker grows too bold, they attack him. But a jackal won't be driven off that easily. Instead, he scores on the herd. At first glance, this seems an entirely futile effort, as he couldn't possibly slay any of these giants. But in this way, he checks on the sick animals inside the herd and finds out whether it might be worthwhile to stay close. In Africa, Elizabeth Schöntal observed the same behavior. For days, a pack of black-backed jackals followed a herd of gnus. One of them was sick and would soon perish. It hadn't fed for quite some time and grew weaker and weaker. When the herd moved on, it tried to keep up. But it fell ever further back and finally stopped under a tree. The emaciated animal's death struggle didn't go unnoticed. In fact, The anticipated feast attracted an increasing number of hungry hunters. In a final attempt, the gnu struggled forward. For hours, the jackals continued to pursue it. When the gnu couldn't carry on any longer, they fell on their helpless victim. In Africa, Elizabeth Schoenthal found additional clues. Jackals mating with dogs had been observed there. Elizabeth looked further into it and learned about Russian biologist Klim Sulimov in Moscow. He crossed jackals with dogs. Within 3 generations, these crossbreeds are so tame that of every 100 animals, 5 can be trained to become excellent search dogs. These Sulimov dogs are supposed to have much better sense of smell than regular dogs. They are able to recall a greater number of different smells over a longer period of time than any other breed. A criminal leaving his scent on the scene isn't safe from Sulimov's dogs, even weeks later. These animal special agents are deployed by the Russian airline Aeroflot in terror defense. Sniffing out weapons and drugs is a trifle for them. Their speciality is tracking minute odors, even smell-proof packages of plastic explosives. It seems as though the jackal's reputation may enjoy a reversal, from satanic pest to highly respected guardian. But perhaps that role isn't so new. For some time, the Austrian zoologist and Nobel Prize winner Konrad Lorenz thought that dogs descended from the jackal, but later renounced this point of view. In Europe, the wolf is considered to be the patriarch of dogs. The mating between dog and jackal in the wild was already described by British scientist Richard Leakey 40 years ago. Indeed, it's entirely possible that because of fertile offspring from such pairings, several dog breeds show jackal traits today. Young golden jackals play just as dog puppies do. Divine being, dreaded pest, or respected protector. The human view of jackals seems contradictory. Along the European coasts, jackals display another fascinating capacity, a distinct sense of time. In Croatia, Italy, and Greece, it's been repeatedly observed that jackals arrive just in time for low tide, when the sea retreats and mussels, snails, worms, and crabs are exposed on the beach. Regardless of whether their feed has claws or is already rotten, a jackal's senses are all geared towards adapting and surviving. The spread of jackals in Europe has long remained unnoticed. Throughout human history, they were thought to be nothing but despicable pests and hunted without mercy. But through all of this, the hedonist golden jackal survived, and he continues moving on wherever he'll find enough food and space to live in. As early as in 1987, a jackal was spotted in Austria, and in 2005, one even paid a flying visit to Vienna. He came just in time for the grape harvest. The grapes were at the height of their maturity. The uninvited guest had timed his arrival perfectly. For about a week, every evening just before sunset, the jackal turned up to inspect the vineyards, tasting his way through the various kinds of grapes. But as quickly as the unfamiliar wanderer had come, he disappeared again. Maybe he even roamed some 100 miles farther to the north. For several weeks after the sighting near Vienna, a jackal was thought to be up to no good near the Czech border. Along the roadside, garbage bags were looted. No one saw the culprit, just like in other places. He left behind only his paw prints in the soft soil, torn bags, and widely scattered garbage. At the scene, other traces than the jackals were discovered too. They were from the neighbor's dog and ended at respectful distance from the looted garbage bag. Apparently, there was no barking, though. Why? One can only speculate. The dog most likely expected to get his share, too. But a jackal may not want to share his loot. The nightly visitor continued his predations on many more garbage bags without ever being seen. And when the villagers finally laid in wait, he disappeared without a trace.
After days on our unsuccessful search for jackals, I had already given up. But that's when Elizabeth's jackal raven came into play. I was busy getting ready to return to civilization, but the bird destroyed my efforts. Now, in hindsight, it seems as if he simply tried to make me stay.
Hey!
Elizabeth said her patient was well again and decided to set him free. That raven with his own jackal story.
Elizabeth was out checking which jackal burrows of the previous year were inhabited again this season. The results were sparse. There were hardly any jackal traces either, except in a dried-out pond. Frogs and toads hid in the cracks there, attracting many predators. What happened then can only be assumed. Suddenly, Elizabeth heard the screeches of a raven, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of a running jackal's shadow. One of the bird's legs was injured, and she took the jackal raven to look after it.
To me, those days in Hungary seemed entirely in vain. My part of the excursion was a total flop. Time ran short, but Elizabeth only took care of her raven. I hadn't even seen so much as a shadow of a jackal. Nothing but dry excrement and some hair. Elizabeth set the raven free, but he wouldn't fly away, sitting a few yards in front of us.
Ich glaube, sieht etwas.
He'd seen something.
Vielleicht ein Hund dort.
Maybe a dog. But it was
Das ist ein Schakal.
a jackal. Nothing in the last several days seemed meaningless anymore. In the jackals, the souls of the deceased live on. They carry Anubis, the god of death, in them, or so the Egyptians believed for thousands of years. Once you've observed them in the wild, you want to see jackals again and again, Elizabeth said. One looks for them. Something out there worried Moritz. I stared into the darkness. Was it a jackal? Or was my imagination playing tricks on me?